Welcome to my channel. My name is Jillian and today I'm going to do the Get Out with Books tag. The tag was created by Sandy from Ms. Reads a Lot and I was tagged by Shelley Swearingen. I will have them both tagged below. Please go check them out. Into Thin Air. What is one of your favorite books about or set in the outdoors? I kind of feel like I'm cheating here because my answer is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. Such a good book. It's about a group of people who are attempting to summit Mount Everest. It's a nonfiction account. Because I kind of feel like that answer is cheating, I'm going to give you a second book. And that one is Kon-Tiki by Thor Heyerdahl. And this is another nonfiction account of a group of men who were trying to prove that the Polynesian islands were settled by people who traveled across the Pacific Ocean on a raft. And so this group of men build a raft out of these balsa trees and they attempt to sail more than 3,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean. It is a absolutely crazy adventure story. Winterdance. This is the story of Gary Paulson running the Iditarod for the first time, even though he isn't particularly good at it. Do you have a hobby or skill that you keep attempting even if you are not particularly good at it? As with any hobby, I think you get better as you go. I am on a mission to bake 12 pies a year. I bake 1 pie a month, and right now my crusts are not looking all that great, but with time, they're definitely improving. Generally pretty good to eat, so I call that a win, but they definitely need some aesthetic help. Wild. This is the story of Cheryl Strayed hiking the PCT after the death of her mother. Recommend a book where the central theme is dealing with grief. The first is Being Mortal by Atul Guwande. He profiles a number of patients in this book, looks at their choices and what ended up happening to them. So he's looking at their grief, but then it also takes a personal turn. In most cases, medicine is trying to extend life at all costs, often to the detriment of patients. And the tension between that and the fact that life is ultimately finite and there is beauty in that. The final book that I want to mention is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. He was a neurosurgeon. He was young, a resident. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He was suddenly in the patient's shoes. This book was published posthumously. It's a beautiful account of him dealing with his own personal grief. Just a beautiful and devastating read that I highly recommend. Into the Wild follows Chris McCandless, who travels to remote Alaska and unfortunately passes away in the wilderness. Does the idea of living off the grid or away from society appeal to you? I'm very much an introvert and I seem to be able to deal with being away from people a lot better than a lot of other people can. I used to live on the big island of Hawaii in this tiny little town. Could not see any neighbors. I just had these native honey creepers surrounding me. It was so lovely. We had to rely on the rain to fill our catchment tank to give us water for our house, but we did have other creature comforts. And though I consider myself to be a pretty low maintenance person, I am not so low maintenance that I could completely live off the grid. The other thing is, if I had to be away from everyone, like no other souls, I don't think I could do that for very long. But if I just had my family with me, I honestly think I would do just fine. A Walk in the Woods is the story of Bill Bryson and Katz hiking the Appalachian Trail. What is a book with a really interesting friendship? So for this, I chose A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I really enjoyed the friendship between Count Alexander and Nina. When the book starts, the Count is pretty depressed and he meets this little 9-year-old girl who is very advanced for her age. She kind of brings a meaning to life back for him. And I loved the imagery of this adult man and this tiny little 9-year-old girl wandering around this hotel, sneaking into different rooms, hunkering down and listening to conversations together. And it felt so, I don't know, so lovely. And they just developed this beautiful friendship that for me was unexpected at the beginning. Adrift is the story of Steve Callahan's time lost at sea. Do you like the water? I love to watch the water, sitting at the ocean and just listening to the waves and the seabirds. It's just so relaxing. In terms of actually being in the water, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think it can best be summed up from the fact that the way I learned to swim was falling into the deep end of a pool. I flailed around enough that I got myself moving. That is the extent of my swimming lessons. I am definitely not a strong swimmer. Hatchet is the fictional story of a young boy who is in a plane crash while traveling to Alaska and has to survive with only a hatchet. What is your favorite survival story? I really enjoy survival stories, and so I'm going to go over a couple here for you. The first one is We Die Alone by David Howarth, and this is a true story. It took place during World War II. A man named Jan, he was working to create this resistance against the Germans from within Norway. His plan got very much derailed, and he ended up having to escape, and he spent this long period of time in these snowy mountains. A number of people helped him who did not know him. Many of them didn't even speak his language. I still can't understand how this man survived. The second book is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. This is another World War II survival story about Louis Zamperini, who was an Olympic track athlete. He was in a plane crash. He survived a long time on a raft in the ocean, and then he became a prisoner of war in Japan. A Perfect Storm. This is a story of fishermen that were lost at sea during a huge storm. Do you like stormy weather? I really enjoy stormy weather. When I lived in Georgia, we used to get these massive thunder and rainstorms. My husband and I would put a couple of chairs out on our deck when the rain started to fall, and then as the rain continued and the wind would blow the rain closer and closer into us, we would just inch our chairs back and back and back so we would stay out of the rain until we were eventually inside. I also enjoy getting caught out in the rain occasionally. Now that I live in New England, it's a lot colder here and we get a lot of snowy winter weather, and there's nothing more cozy than having this big snowstorm outside and hearing the wind and watching the white go past you and seeing these snowdrifts, and you're sitting inside with a nice cup of coffee, book to read, and it's just, to me, that is heaven. And finally, tag some friends. I'm tagging two booktubers today. One is Kelly Reads a Lot, and the other is Kushi Kishore. They're both linked below. I hope they do this tag. I can't wait to hear your answers if you do. And if you guys would like to see a recent bookstore tour that I did of this really, really cool bookstore, please go check this out. It is absolutely beautiful, and I know you're gonna wanna end up taking a trip there. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.